This is Dr. Mitch Randall, CEO of Good Faith Media. This week's episode of Good Faith Weekly was recorded prior to the horrifying events that unfolded in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Good Faith Media extends our heartfelt condolences to Renee Good's family and the larger Minneapolis community. Additionally, we condemn the unlawful tactics being used by ICE agents against citizens and immigrants. If America truly wants to be a more perfect union, then citizens must stand together to demand accountability and consequences for these evil acts.
Always the question is a power analysis of who benefits by you not having sex before marriage.
You're listening to Good Faith Weekly. I'm Mitch Randall.
And I'm Missy Randall.
We're here each week exploring the intersection of faith and culture.
We find people who stand up, speak out, and step forward
for inclusion, freedom, and justice for all.
It's time for Good Faith Weekly.
Brought to you by Good Faith Media. Welcome to Good Faith Weekly. On this episode, Missy and I are going to catch up, and we want to wish you and yours a happy new year. We are going to kick off the year right by talking about a new initiative at Good Faith Media, Add Faith Media. We're also going to talk about sex to kick off the year. Then later on the pod, we sat down with Reverend Alba Onofrio, who is Reverend Sex, to talk about an important topic, shame. It is a great pod, so stay tuned. Hello there, Missy.
Hey, how are you?
I'm well, and you?
Honestly, I'm a little hungover.
Wow, beginning the new year with confessions.
I know. Not that way, though.
Oh, okay.
Not that way. No, I've got a little bit of a holiday hangover, to be honest. I don't know about you.
Yeah.
We are coming back off of, 2 or 3 weeks of a pod break.
Yeah, for us, that's forever.
I don't think we've ever done that. I don't know what we're doing. I don't know what to do with my hands. I don't know how to work the microphone.
Yeah, you look like a first grader over there.
A what?
A first grader.
First grader. Thanks for that. But yeah, this just feels so off. It reminds me of when our kids used to go back to school after winter break, and I just would sit there and think, how do I pack a lunch? I don't feel like I know what I'm doing. So forgive me.
Yeah.
However,
speak into the microphone.
Okay. Sorry.
And think before you speak.
That's always the problem. Thank goodness for editors. That's right. All I have to say. Yeah. So, but anyways, it turns out the cure for a good holiday hangover is to kick off the pod year with sex, apparently. I mean.
Wow. So hangovers and sex. Here we go. 2026.
I know. And suddenly I'm sweating.
Never mind.
Literally. No. So our guest today is actually Reverend Sex, so Reverend Alba Onofrio, who works in the space of reclaiming sexuality and identity and works to combat shame and things like that surrounding purity culture. It is a fascinating conversation. We're going to talk a little bit more about it in a minute. Mm-hmm. But before that, we're starting this year with a bang.
We are.
No pun intended. Here at Good Faith Media as well, because this week we launched
Bad Faith Media.
And when I say we, that's a very loose we. I had little to do with it, but yes. So Bad Faith Media is now an initiative of Good Faith Media, and we're really excited about it. I'm nervous about it for a reason I'll tell you in a minute. But let's talk a little bit about why and what Bad Faith Media is here for. Yeah.
Well, this has been a dream of mine for years now. You know this, and I've talked a little bit about it on the pod and written about it over the course of the years. I, along with many others, think that comedians are prophets among us, and they do such a great job. And, you and I are always just astounded by Stephen Colbert, Jon Stewart, Samantha Bee, so many other comedians who are able to speak truth to power. And oh my gosh, this particular year with Colbert and Kimmel and all that's going on with this current administration has just been remarkable. So the ability to utilize humor, because the reality is if we don't laugh, we're going to cry. But at the same time, if we don't use humor as not only a coping mechanism, but as a truth teller, then I think we're in serious trouble. And that's where I think the comedians can help us. And that's why I think it's so important for us to be able to laugh as well as tell truth using comedy as a tool.
I so agree. And one of the kind of informal taglines we've been using this week is that laughter is belief without the vocabulary.
Absolutely.
And I think that is so true. Like you said, comedians are prophets among us. They are some of the most brilliant people that we know, able to interpret something that you know in your body it doesn't feel right or isn't right, and they're able to put a mirror there and say,
Right.
yeah, this is absurd. And I feel like absurd is kind of a lot of what we're living in right now. I'm very excited about it. What I'm nervous about, of course, is that our son is involved.
Yes.
And
yes, he
along
is.
with two other, several folks will contribute to Bad
we've got
Faith Media. But we have three main
yeah.
shepherds, as we're calling
Absolutely.
them. One is our son. We'll talk about in a minute. And then another one is another of my comedic heroes, which is Paul Williams, whose alter ego is Sister Helen Holy from the Southern Fried First Baptist, I hope I'm getting this right, church. And then Wanda Kidd, who we love and adore, who is also a comic of her own right. And so I'm so excited about their content. I'm really nervous about our son's content.
Right. As you should be.
Right.
Because we know our son.
We've learned a lot about comedy from him and
have.
from his journey as he came up through high school and through theater and then through college, because he actually went to college, believe it or not, and studied comedy.
Mm-hmm.
And we always joked he was going to clown college. And it was funny, haha, but it was actually serious. And there's some reasons why for that. Because this program was not just about making a joke. The program was about studying history, studying culture, society, religion, all manners of what makes comedy influence the present, influence history, influence the future, how it influences culture. And that was pretty serious business for him and his cohort of classmates. And so one of the things that I learned through his journey, and to make a point about what you said earlier, I remember, I think it was Jerry Seinfeld, one time talked about comedy as a geometry proof.
Mm-hmm.
And as a numbers person, this spoke to me. If you remember your geometry classes, you have a proof on the board and you have, all of these kind of this list on the left, and then on the right-hand side of the proof, you have to show me why these two things match.
Right.
And that's what a comedian does for us. They show us the connections, and they show us, how something makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so looking at it in that way, I feel like our son's education was great.
Sure.
Again, still makes me nervous, but that brings me to a story in particular about his educational experience that plays in so well to our interview today, because there's a subject matter crossover.
I know the story you're about to share.
No, I think you're going to share because it's your story to tell, but it's pretty funny.
Okay.
So our son was over in London for a study abroad program, and it was particularly focused in on comedy throughout history and how comedy has influenced culture. And the kind of the program title was From Shakespeare to Monty Python.
Right.
And so it was a great
title,
great
by the
program,
way, for a class,
but you got to have a little fun too, right?
Sure.
So their final project at the end of the study abroad term was to do a stand-up set in a local pub. And which is so fun, right? And so, the kids did it. As weird luck would have it, you happened to be traveling through that part of town.
Yeah, well, I was in Beirut, Lebanon, and then I was traveling back to the U.S. and stopped over in London.
As one does when they're traveling back from Beirut. Stop over in London for a comedy show at a pub,
absolutely.
right? Yeah, so you were able to kind of route yourself to be there for his show. You were the only, friend or parent who was able to be in the audience, but it was super cool. And Cole was great about letting you come, but I'll let you take it from there and tell the story of how this unfolded.
Yeah, it was a great story. I mean, yes, I was in London and got this incredible opportunity to see our son perform. And so I got to the pub early. And so I found him, and, he and his other classmates were really nervous because some of them, this was the first time they ever performed in front of a live audience. And so he's pacing back and forth. And so, as a father,
Lots
I'm trying.
Nervous energy.
Yeah, a lot of nervous energy. So as a father, I'm trying to calm his nerves. It's going to be great. Try to be encouraging to him. And so I said, Cole, are you okay? And he said, yeah, I'm going to be all right. I'm just thinking the routine through. And so I said, okay, so you know your routine and everything. He said, yeah, I'm good, Dad. And so he just kind of concentrated for a little bit. I said, all right, I'm going to go get my seat. And so break a leg. And he said, oh, one last thing, Dad. And I said, yeah, sure. And he said, the entire set's about you. And then walked away. It was like, okay, so I find my seat as nervous as can be at this point because I know the emphasis is going to be on me somehow, some way, having no idea what he's about to tell. So he is like the third in line of the comics. And so he stands up, grabs the mic, and he begins his set this way. So I want to tell you about the first time my dad told me about sex. And then he goes on this incredible diatribe telling the story of the very first time I told him about sex. And here's the crazy part. Every bit of it was true.
It was an absolutely true story and a great story.
Oh, it was such a great story.
In, a very human experience, our kids had seen a movie and something, he caught on to something we didn't think he had. And he came to our room late one night and he was like, all right, I need you guys to tell me what's up. What is this? And so we both, we fancy ourselves progressive and open and we'll talk about anything with our kids. But when you're presented in that moment, I mean, we both just kind of were at a loss for words.
Exactly.
You took the reins, thankfully, and, taught him all the mechanics. But the best part is there's illustrations involved. There is a picture drawn by you, a diagram of sorts, which is fantastic. And I'm just going to say it might make an appearance. Well, you know what? It might not make an appearance for the right donation.
Yes.
You can have access to this drawing by Reverend Dr. Mitch Randall.
Yeah, if Good Faith Media ever publishes a sex ed book, I am your illustrator.
I'm going to go with hard pass on that. Hard pass on that. We want accurate information out there. But yeah, it was so funny. So the story was so great, but it was made even better, of course, by the fact that you happened to be in the audience. Yeah. And of course he brought into
he brought me up.
And of course he brought into the set that you were a Baptist preacher, which, was great. Yeah. And so it was just
it was the most uncomfortable and greatest moment of my lifetime. It was terrific.
To my point, I'm a little nervous about his involvement with Bad Faith Media, but also a little excited about what's to come with the content that all of our shepherds will be producing.
We're super excited about Bad Faith Media. So check out Bad Faith Media at badfaithmedia.org.
Okay, so kind of along the same subject line.
Yes.
Our interview today with Reverend Sex, I know you guys, listeners, stick with us.
Yes.
I blushed a couple of times during our conversation.
And I will let the listeners decide which parts of the interview you blushed.
Right. There's a little bit about that. But also, there's so much more to this conversation. Yeah. I would encourage you to stick around and listen to it. It was so meaningful to me. As we said, Alba deals quite a bit with sexuality and with shame and purity culture and all of the elements that kind of create us as sexual beings in this culture, in this context, in the wake of colonialism and evangelicalism and all the things that play into it. So it was a really robust conversation. And I want the listeners to keep your ears peeled for three things that really meant a lot to me. One is in the beginning, we talk about bodily knowledge. And this is kind of a new framing for me to talk about what that means and what it means to not have it. The second thing we talk about is who benefits. And take this out of a context of even a sexual nature. Who benefits by telling you something is right or wrong, or you can or cannot do something? And I think that's an important question to ask, and one that wasn't ever, told us to do, and one that we weren't ever really allowed to ask.
Right.
When you say you can't do X, Y, Z, and especially in the context of the church, you can't wear shorts, or, you can't listen to certain music, or you can't do, who is benefiting from these things? And if it doesn't feel right to you, there's probably a reason.
Right.
And that's somebody taking away your agency and taking away your own bodily knowledge, as we talk about as well. The third thing that really meant a lot to me is when she talks about as we were trained in the binary. We were trained in, there was darkness, then there was light, there was land, and then there's water. She took that and just, I don't even want to give it away because she opened up a whole new realm for me in terms of how we were trained in the binary and how ingrained that is in us to think of that in human form as well. So those were just some really meaningful moments I'd really like for our listeners to kind of key into, aside from the fun, the fun kind of giggly talk about sex as well.
Yeah. Well, this conversation is couched in sex, but They emphasize shame so much.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great reminder about how powerful a tool shame has become
Mm-hmm.
to control people.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's sex, whether it's politics, whatever the issue might be, shame has been used as a tool by those in power,
Mm-hmm.
by those who benefit, as you said a moment ago, to manipulate and to control other people. And that was really eye opening to me in this realm of sexuality and gender and this, identifying who we are and the agency we have as a created being of the divine. So it's a great conversation, and they really opened a lot of things for me that I have been thinking about for quite some time, but they just put it in a really beautiful new way for me.
Yeah, I've said it before. I'll say it again and again and again. I love a good reframing. And
Right.
this conversation was a great reframing for me. I just love so many things about it. So I will say this is a first for us to have a podcast interview about, sex and shame and sexuality and guilt and all those things. But I'm really excited that this is the way we're kind of kicking off our year with something a little different than our usual topic.
Well, Missy, as much as I would like to keep this entire podcast episode on comedy and sex, there is one thing I need to talk about.
Can we not just go back to the laughter?
I wish we could. But as our listeners know, something happened the last couple of weeks that has really been alarming. And that is so the Trump administration went into Venezuela and captured, or some people say kidnapped,
Mm-hmm.
their president, Nicolas Maduro. Now, let's not mince words. Maduro
He's
is a
horrible.
horrible human being.
Mhm.
But the fact that we went into a sovereign country and took their leader and brought that leader back in the United States to try that person is quite remarkable. Now, we have
Mhm.
done it in the past, but what has transpired after that is really alarming because Trump now says that he is running the
Mhm.
country, and that not only that, he's got other countries in mind.
Right.
He's back to Greenland. He's talking about Cuba. He's talking about Mexico. This sends shivers down the entire global community.
And let me go ahead and interject something from our conversation about sex.
Okay, go right
In the
ahead.
interview. Again, dear listener, pay attention to the part in the interview about who benefits.
Yeah.
And I think that is true. Like I said, that is true in so many aspects of our life.
Right.
Is that we really need to look at, and I understand in politics and in world, global happenings, there's always an element of that. Who's really benefiting? This is just one time we really need to pay attention because I feel like we're saying it over and over again.
Yeah.
This is not normal. This is not normal. This is not normal.
Yeah, and he is saying it out loud. I mean, when we invaded Iraq, we were trying to liberate an aggressor, but at the same time, Kuwait, it was about oil, but
Mhm.
nobody said it out loud. It was just in the quiet, murmurings and hallways. But he's saying it out loud. This is about oil, to the point he briefed oil companies before making this decision and said so out loud and continues to do so. So this particular instance is about oil and who controls it and who benefits from it. So you're exactly right. And here is my biggest point that I want to make. And it breaks my heart to say this. I was talking to one of our board members not long ago about this. And I told that board member, do you remember the moment when President George W. Bush talked about the axis of evil? And he talked about Russia. He talked about the Soviet Union. And he talked about China and all the violations, the human rights violations that they were conducting. Here's what breaks my heart. For so long, we have been battling the axis of evil. My fear is that we have crossed a Rubicon and are actually part of the axis of evil now.
Right. I told you recently that I've changed my language because we've continued for the last several years since the current administration has been in power in influence.
Mm-hmm.
And we keep saying, this is not who we are. This is not who we are. And I've changed my language. This is not who we were.
Right.
Because we have to face facts. It is who we are.
Right.
And I think that changes our marching orders. honestly, as people, as a democracy. We can keep saying, we can keep putting on our, sitting on our high horse, and this isn't who we are. Well, guess what? Mm-hmm. It's not who we were, but we need to face facts, and it is who we are, and what are we going to do about it?
Yeah, and as you and I were talking about it before the recording, you came up with this beautiful expression of a collected voice, and that is what is needed right now. We need a collected voice. Unfortunately, there is no such voice being heard right now. There are individuals who are saying a lot of things, but we need Republicans, we need Democrats, we need Christians, we need Jews, we need Muslims. We need everybody to begin to stand up, step forward, and speak out about this evil that we're seeing unfold before our eyes. If not, we're no longer going to have a country. And so we've got to step in. This is the moment. This is the time. So we've got to start doing it. We need that collective voice, as you said.
Okay, yes. And also, can we get back to sex now?
Yes.
Wait, let me fix that. Can we get back to the topic of sex now?
I was fine with the way you worded it.
I mean, all right, now I'm blushing again. Oops. They're probably going to leave that
in. Yes, we can get back to our discussion. And like you said at the beginning, we had a great conversation with Reverend Alba Onofrio.
We really did. And I so appreciated her words, her encouragement, her wisdom, and helping me to reframe all of the guilt and shame and things that are still residing inside my body that I'm trying to relinquish as an adult.
So we'll be right back with Reverend Sex.
You know, Missy, I really enjoy recording this podcast with you each and every week.
Do you?
Well, but this is not the only thing we do at Good Faith Media.
It's not. We have so many offerings for you. We have a plethora of podcasts, videos, news and opinion articles, Bible studies, books, and much, much more. Find us at goodfaithmedia.org.
Welcome back to Good Faith Weekly. On this episode, we've got a very special guest with us. Reverend Alba Onofrio is a public theologian and spiritual activist rooted in the Southern Appalachian Mountains, engaged in movement work for over 20 years. As executive director and spiritual strategist for Soulforce, an international LGBTQ plus social justice organization, Alba has authored a series of theological resources on liberatory approaches to the Bible and uncovering the ideologies of white Christian supremacy. Also known by her public persona, Reverend Sex, they are a co-founding member of the Sexual Liberation Collective with a mission to eradicate shame and fear around bodies and sex, to reclaim pleasure and desire as potent centers of sacred knowledge, healing, and spiritual praxis. Onofrio is the host of her podcast, Shameless TSV. I'll have her pronounce that for you after we get started. So, Alba, welcome to Good Faith Weekly.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here with y'all.
So Alba, welcome and Happy New Year. I have to tell you that I did not imagining us kicking off the pod year with Reverend Sex, but here we are, and
honored.
I'm here for it. So thank you for joining us.
And we're on Three Kings Day, so this is like a magical time in general.
It is.
Excellent. So I'll give a little bit of a disclaimer. I'm going to try real hard not to make this interview my one-on-one session about my own shame and issues surrounding purity culture, but I'd make no promises. So
we'll do it later. We'll do more later. I'm available anytime.
That's going to be on our Patreon. We don't have a Patreon account, but
we'll have one now, right? Okay. So before we get into the issues. Let's talk about the overall mission of Soulforce and a bit about the evolution of your podcast, which recently finished its inaugural season in English, and for which I want you to talk to us about the name of it that I cannot even begin to say as beautifully as you do.
Yeah.
Sure. Yes, Teología sin vergüenza is how you say it in Spanish. And it's a really important way of reclaiming. So similar to the way that the word queer has been reclaimed. And so for some generations, that's still a painful word. And so we use it tenderly. But for younger generations, that has been a word that has been reclaimed and something we wear with pride. Sin vergüenza is a very gendered, it has a little bit of different flavor depending on what culture and context you're in throughout Latin America. But the closest thing I can use from my Southern context to represent what sin vergüenza is like if you have an auntie or a grandma who would say to you, "How do No shame, honey. Cross your legs, pull your skirt down,
Right.
be quiet. You're supposed to be seen and not heard. That orientation is what a sinvergüenza is. And so it can be used to name somebody, which is intentional to kind of shame you into better behavior. But it's usually used for girls and women who are a little too loud, who are a little too irreverent, who are showing a little bit too much flesh or too much connected to their own sexuality. And it's meant to put us in our place. And so Teología sin vergüenza is kind of a continuation of Marcela Altas's Reed idea of theology, which has all of this really provocative language. But basically it means, yeah, we are those nasty quote unquote women who, or genderqueer people, or the whole diversity of what we can be, that says we're not ashamed of being activist, and we're also not ashamed of our faith, because often folks feel very isolated where they have to leave one of those identities at the door. If I'm in church, I can't be a feminist. If I'm a feminist, I can't be a Christian. And so it's about a space where those things get to come together and live together. And we get to actually center our lived experiences to say, there are many of us. We may feel isolated, but our theologies are vast and they offer so many offerings to this moment. And so we just come together to have coffee and have a conversation and feature a different queer and feminist theologian each week.
So I may not be able to say it, but I can certainly relate because everything you described, I feel like is so universal if you grew up in any sort of context similar to what we did. So tell us about the mission of Soulforce.
Yeah.
About the organization.
Soulforce has been around for almost 30 years.
Wow.
And our work is to end the spiritual, religious, and political persecution of LGBT people. And what that really just means is wherever religion, and particularly Christianity, because that is the religion of power in our hemisphere, wherever that's been used, and in the name of God, people have insulted other people's existence or denied their sacred worth, or made us to feel that we can't be loved by God or we're not included in the body of Christ. That is where we work. So we work on the theologies, we work on the ideologies that are actually coming from empire and systems of power and not from God, but it dresses up in the robes or in the sheep's clothing of Christianity. And so then it gets internalized and people think, oh, that is true, or that is God. And that's the work that we do, both on the individual spiritual healing level, but also on the political education to understand what is going on where God and Christianity and the Bible get used on mass scale to cause a lot of harm or justify harm that's happening politically.
Yeah, and that's my follow-up question, Alba, is that you do talk a lot about shame on the podcast and and on the website, on your website as well. And so from sexuality to politics, you conclude that shame interferes with who God really created us to be as individuals and as a community. So expounding on that idea, there's this wonderful example on your site there of questions. You entertain questions from listeners and readers, and it's really wonderful the engagement that you have. And one of them is a struggle with purity culture, and there's really an issue that one particular reader had, and that was dealing with the fact that they wanted to get married, but they felt like they were getting married because they wanted to have guiltless sex.
Wow, it just jumped right in there.
I just jumped right in there. Absolutely.
Yeah, let's do it. Absolutely.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about how shame affects us as creatures of the divine in an attempt to try to be fully human as the divine has created us to be, and how shame is a barrier to that.
Yeah. Well, if you think about our religion as Christians, regardless of denomination, we have a faith that is embedded in enfleshment, in embodiment, in this idea that there is a divine that came into human form. And therefore, our bodies have to be a relevant concern. But in so many of our communities, in our churches, in our families, the body is something that is a slippery slope, a vehicle for sin, something to be suspect. And what that does is that it creates a control mechanism that happens outside of ourselves. So we have to believe whatever we're told, whether it's the Bible said, whether or not we read it ourselves, somebody told us the Bible said that you have to be this way, or God said you had to be this way, or my parents said I had to be this way, all of these things in an effort to be worthy or good or show that we're saved, et cetera, et cetera. And so when we ultimately fail, which we always will, it creates this fear of being caught. It creates this shame of being not perfect or not good enough to be worthy of fill in the blank, everything from salvation to love to, our being in our own bodies. And so what that means is that we silence all of the incredible gifts that God has given us to tell us when something is wrong or something is right or something is a yes or a no. Like, I think about how most of us can feel when somebody's looking at us. Like, you ever been at a restaurant and you can feel eyes on you and you're like, oh, who's looking? And maybe it's somebody who's like, oh, you like dribbled down your chin, or somebody else who's like, you dropped your wallet or whatever it is. But we can feel that even from a distance, right? That is part of our bodily knowledge that God has offered us as one of many tools, along with other tools of discernment like our minds and our logic. And so by taking those away from us, by saying that the body is bad and suspect and the center of sin, then it gives the power to somebody outside of ourselves. So that's why shame and getting rid of shame is so important, because as long as we have it, we can be easily manipulated and controlled to say, you have to behave in this way or in that way in order to be a good person. Whereas we should rather be instilling ourselves and our children with understanding of like, this is my body that God has given to me as a gift. And therefore it is my work to love it, to know it, to understand it, and to be able to use my own discernment. Just like I have to discern whether I like receive and want God in my life or not, the same discernment should apply to what happens to my body. What is a kind of relationship that is loving, that is respectful? What is a kind of interaction that is consensual? I mean, I never even heard the word consent, ever. Not one time in my entire growing up life in the church did I hear that word. And it's an incredibly important word when we think about even just free will. So that's a light touch
So
on it.
in that example that I gave you, I remember reading that, and one of the real main points was the ability to get through this shame that was a barrier to who they were, and I remember they said something about they're having to deny their natural desires to kind of play into this colonialized sexuality that we possess. So how, what evidence, or not what evidence, but what suggestions or advice do you give to people like that who are dealing with this? I mean, it seems like what you're talking about is really a deep need for an entirely new theology of sexuality that the church needs to tackle.
Absolutely. And I actually think that LGBT people have a leg up on that. And I think one of the gifts that God has given us in particular is that for those of us who survive the inward work of trying to figure out what is going on with this whole sex, desire, body thing, which not all of us do survive that. But for those of us who do, we've had to look at that in a really honest and direct way, and most of us in very deep conversation with the divine and prayer. And I think that is a way for us to lean forward toward what could be a new theology of sexuality. And so always the question is a power analysis of who benefits by you not having sex before marriage. What does that benefit, right? We're given a message of that it's about purity and being unused, although that's very differently applied depending on what gender you are. But who benefits by you constantly thinking about how you keep yourself pure, how you protect yourself against sexual violence, how you deny yourself? It becomes obsessive, or it becomes so full that it's like, I can't focus even on what the things are ahead of me. I can't make a good decision about who I want to marry. I can't decide what's a good fit for lifelong, even sexual connection, right? As somebody who goes by the name Reverend Sex, it's because I want to jump into the sex part. I don't want us to pretend like, because I've had so many conversations with so many Christians where after we get under the layers of the Bible and after we get under the layers of theology, what's really under there is a absolute terror around sexuality, whether it's homosexuality for people who are heterosexual. What will I do if some man flirts with me? Or if it's about, I never had that opportunity to explore, so I actually have no idea what's there and I'm really scared of it because I've only been told it's bad. So quantities of people who get married are supposed to flip a switch, and this thing that was supposed to be bad for their entire lives, you put a ring on it, and now it's supposed to be something that you enjoy and it's a blessing. But there's no education around it. There's no understanding of it. There's no exploration or history there. There's no even way to understand if you and your partner are compatible in that way around sex, pleasure, desire, or what you should do around communicating to get on the same page. So that work of helping to discern who benefits if I don't listen to my own self sidetracks us from a different kind of theology that says God made you in God's image and wants you to be well and live into abundance and fullness. What kind of relationships, sexual, friendship, familial, will set you up for that and won't, and what won't? And words like consent and compatibility and communication, those are kinds of concepts that could fit into a new idea of what God wants for us in fullness and wholeness and abundance that is not centered on violent metaphors for God or patriarchal understandings of power dynamics within family relationships, that could help us get to a place where young people could discern for themselves, or even permission to masturbate or touch your own self, like even exploring those ideas of what do I like in my own body is labeled sinful. And so we come into these relationships with other people with so little understanding of our own selves, of our own desire and pleasure. And then we somehow expect this to be a perfect, like, lock and key match. And when it isn't, it just creates another wave of shame and violence.
And I think what you said early on, it just so resonates with me as I'm become an adult, and I've heard, I've thought a lot about this, but the high control or just control religions, like you said, who benefits from taking away that inner voice that you have about anything? Who benefits? But then what happens is when someone takes that inner voice away from you, you learn to not trust your gut. Then over time, you learn to not be able to hear when it's telling you something is wrong. And then, like you said, when you get into your relationship, if you get married and you're one of those that flips that switch and says, okay, now this is supposed to be okay, you're not even able to understand yourself, your own feelings, your own desire, your own wants. And so just everything, like you said, you're taking it out of your own body and putting your trust in someone else, or the institution. And that's never going to serve you. That's only going to serve those in power in the institution. Yeah. So anyways, such food for thought.
Don't have a young married couple like group where you can think about how can we play? Because that's the other thing. Sex is so serious. And it's like, as adults, we're told to be serious, but we're supposed to be able to play with our children and like enjoy that, but it's supposed to be stuck in childhood. But sex is a playground for adults. So we feel often, many of us feel shameful in not knowing what we want and like. We feel shame about telling our partners if we do, or if we don't. We just feel shame around even having to communicate anything around it. And then there's no framework for, well, I don't know if I like my toes sucked. Let's try it and see. Well, I don't know if I like.
Wow, didn't have that on the bingo
I don't
card
know
either.
if I,
that one on the bingo card.
I don't know if I like making out, or if I kind of think kissing is gross and I'd rather stick to something else. Like, there's a laundry list of things that even if you're within the most traditional frameworks of marriage, that provide a source of pleasure, that if we were allowed to explore in ways that understood that this is about play, it's not that serious. Somebody passes gas during sex and you laugh about it, and then you get back to whatever it is you're doing. It's not like, oh my God, my whole identity as a sexual being is now shut down and I have to go cry in the corner. Like, I don't need to wear makeup to bed. All of these things that we do to try to project a version of us that is not the real us. But God created us in God's image to be loved for exactly who we are, and know that there are probably more than one person out there who's going to adore you for exactly who you are and all of your weirdness or toe sucking or whatever it is. Like, it doesn't matter. That's not the point. The point is the connection. Sure. And we should be able to live into that fully.
Absolutely.
So another focus of your work, I'm going to switch gears just a little bit, deals with transgenderism. Our trans friends are obviously really facing backlash right now in this moment that we're living in. So talk about a couple of things. One, how do we, as those of us who are cisgender Christians, how are we best able to affirm our transgender friends, and how do you help them work through their own theology in the face of such condemnation socially?
Yes. Ooh, those are important questions for this moment. One, I think it's really important to explore the things that we've been taught and to unearth those quiet voices that are lurking in the corners, ready to say, oh, that bad thing happened because you are fill in the blank, something related to sin, something related to your identity. Because a lot of us, we logically are like, that doesn't make any sense. We get to be adults and we can work our way through it through reason, but the fear that maybe God does hate me, or maybe I am bad because those kinds of messages, really being able to bring those to the surface and dig in with other folks who are willing to go there and be like, all right, let's look at the text. Let's look at the Bible. Let's look at messages like God doesn't make mistakes, all of that stuff. Like let's go there, and rather than trying to explain it away, let's feel through it and really go in. And so part of what we do is talk about the example that we have in the natural world, right? So even Paul in Romans, just a couple of verses before he starts condemning people for their unnatural acts, he talks about, basically in my version, shame on you if you don't know God, because God literally created everything and it's all around you. So if you don't know God, shame on you, because it's literally here for everyone to see, even those who don't know the gospel of Jesus Christ. So I really take that to heart. And when I look around in nature, if we look at, pick a thing, fruit, or that's one of my favorite things when I go to a new place is check out what fruit grows locally in that area and taste new things. But think about flowers, think about plants, think about animals, think about just subspecies of butterflies, or whatever it is. There is nothing in creation that would say to us that the creator, who I think is more like a drag queen than like, a chaplain at a church, is like, there's nothing that tells us that that creator would create human beings in two extremely rigid boxes called sex that are not movable, and one sexuality, which is heterosexuality. There's nothing that would reflect that. On the reverse, if we say God is a wildly expansive, creative, sometimes really gaudy, but nonetheless extremely creative being, and we as humans are representations of that kind of creating, the vastness of our colors and textures and sizes and shapes, desires and pleasures and identities, that fits way more in with the idea of God as we see reflected in nature than this rigid patriarchal, judge God warrior figure. And so that's part of where we start, as opposed to jumping into the frame of what conservative Christianity has taught us and trying to explain our way out of it. We start with a different frame, and from there everything is possible. So one example that I can give is in Genesis 1, it talks about God making the day and the night and separating them. And so we get a lot of this binary thinking, binary logic, night and day, land and water, all of that stuff. And that's what sticks in our brain. We get trained in these binary either or, black and white kind of scenarios. But if we think about what is not named in Genesis 1, like the sunset or the sunrise or the swampland or the shoreline, all of those in between spaces that say, yes, water is divided from land, but then there's all this liminal space in between. What if your gender is something that isn't land or water, but is the shore, right? No one goes to the beach and says, an abomination. Can you believe this sand touching the water? No, nobody looks at a gorgeous sunset and says, red and pink and orange and yellow and blue. This is horrific. Can you believe this? This is an abomination. Don't look. Everybody marvels at the wonder of such beauty. And we should be doing the same thing with our gender nonconforming, gender diverse, and trans folks, to say, this isn't about, something being black or white. This is about the expansiveness of a wildly inclusive creator. And when people talk about, God doesn't make mistakes, so you want a different body, blah, 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 blah. I think of the narrative that has come from the trans community of like, well, God didn't make bread or wine either. God made grain and grapes so that we could participate in creation. And I think that's very true for our trans community as well. So as Christians, when we think about that, it's easy to fall into that binary logic or those messages that we've been repeated of like, this is about God, this is about God, this is about God. And we have to do the work and the effort to say, if a theology that paints God small in tiny boxes hurts and leads to death, is that the God we want to follow? And the good news is there is another option. There are so many other options. And part of what that says is if you go looking for other theologies, we exist. We as humans, we as theologians, we as lines of ideologies exist that say, no, that isn't an abomination. That is rather an expansive and incredible representation of an incredibly vast and creative God that we serve.
I love
Beautiful.
that.
Okay, Alba, I want to talk a little bit about your Latin culture and your Latin ancestry, because, when I listen to the podcast, when I read your work, I mean, Latin liberation theology just comes out in every format. And so I want to talk a little bit about that and talk about the history of shame and sexuality in Latin cultures and other indigenous groups across North and South America. So talk to me about how your culture and how your understanding of liberation theology plays a part in this new sexuality that you're promoting.
I love that new sexuality. I'm like, oh, that sounds like an exciting gay agenda. We'll have to work on that. I actually think the sexuality and gender part is older than colonization.
Yeah.
And that's a little bit about what it's
Right.
about, right?
Yeah.
Is about rather than having this very colonizer mindset, we have to recognize. So part of my family's from Appalachia,
Hmm.
coal mining country, coal miners, and the other half of the family's from Colombia. So I have this very interesting mixture of both these cultures. And it's different, right? Because the US, North America had a different colonizer. So their colonizing strategy felt different, looked different. It was based on genocide, whereas Latin Americans colonizer had much more to do with like mixing and improving the race and getting towards whiteness. But they're very different colonizing strategies. What they have in common is that they both came with the Bible and a forced Christianization. And so what we have to do and work on that I see across liberation theologies, from Mujerista theology, which is more of a US based recognition of folks in diaspora, through Latin American liberation theologies, and also Latin American feminist theology, which is really important and doesn't get quite nearly enough recognition for their history, is doing this work of trying to understand colonization's role in Christianity, because that's a particular version of Christianity. It's a way of creating subjects, basically, through imperial forces, which is a very different kind of Christianity than how Christianity started, right, in the ancient Near East, where it was a much more communal, relational kind of underground community building effort. So part of the work around Teología Sin Vergüenza that is really important to me as somebody who grew up in diaspora in the US is understanding how we connect back to those roots. Because so much of what happens is we leave our home countries because of economic conditions or family reunification, millions of reasons. And then we lose those connections to where we come from and indigeneity, but we also are still totally impacted by the legacies of generational traumas and things like that. So part of what this work does is it's trying to understand what constructs were we given. And we choose Christianity, or maybe I'll speak for myself as a Christian minister. I choose Christianity because that was the language I was given to talk about the divine. This is the logical conclusion of a colonizing project. You raped our women, you forcibly baptized our babies. Y'all have to make room for us because this is part of also our expression of faith. So rather than abandon it, this is a different way of coming at it to say, well, our lived experience, our embodiments matter also. And what queer and trans feminists in Latin America and across that diaspora are doing is using experience. And, in that Wesleyan quadrilateral, if you're really nerdy or you went to div school, they have this Wesleyan quadrilateral that say the ways of revelation are four, right? We have experience, we have logic and reason, we have tradition, and we have the sacred text. And this experience and these liberation theologies experience really takes a front seat to how we work on understanding the divine through understanding our experiences. And that's a really important way to maneuver within the religion, but also to understand that we can expand beyond that to understand God in other ways besides what we've always been given.
Yeah, very well said.
So I have a question about the final episode of your first season that I just listened to a few days ago. You talked about your surprise at your audience's age demographic, which I also found fascinating. So I want to talk about that for a minute.
Yes.
You knew that young people would tune into your podcast,
Yes.
but you found out 25% of your audience is made up of women 65 and older. So I have my own theories, but what do you think? Why is this resonating with that demographic?
Yes, this is particularly in Latin America. And I love the senoras. I love them because of my experience, and I did work on immigration and recently arrived immigrants for the first 10 years of my career before I focused on LGBT stuff. And my experience with the senoras is there's just a certain point in life where you cannot be bothered with all the games and the drama and it's just like life has been too hard and I have done all the things I was supposed to, especially for women who have gotten married, had children, raised those children, now they're out of the house. There's this moment, this precious moment after that has happened, where women have status in society, they've done all the supposed tos, they've lived their lives the way they were told. And now it's like, okay, I did all of that, but there's more, and I want to know the truth. And there is a relentlessness with which those women are willing to face facts, realities, histories, experiences that gives me so much hope, actually, for the world, for what's possible, because it's just like no more bullshit. I don't want any more lies. I don't want anybody else to tell me what to do. I want to know the answers to the questions that I may have carried most of my life that I can't figure out how to get answered with the places and the people and the authorities that I've been given thus far. And I think that that's what draws them because they're interested in hearing other women and trans people's stories about their lived experience that's really different from their own, or maybe similar to their own, or maybe a path that could have been should they have gone down a different way, and are willing to engage with that rigorously and without a lot of ego. And that's my guess and my experience
I think it's a
of the
great
folks I've
guess.
met.
Yeah.
What do you
I was
think?
going to say, I'm kind of interested in what your take
no,
is.
I mean, very I mean, not quite as deep as you've gone, but just in the fact that I feel like a younger audience is going to come to your material in a different way, having grown up in a different context and looking for affirmation of the things they've already believed or are already thinking in more as, cheerleaders and yes, yes, yes. And then older women who grew up not even with the opportunity to think outside that box, are coming to it in a different way and are coming and saying, oh my goodness, you are opening this knowledge for me. You're shining a light on something where maybe somewhere deep down I might have known that something didn't feel right or something didn't mesh with what my own body was telling me. And now it's such an education from, at a different age. So yeah, I agree with everything you said. I just think it's so fascinating and it's so wonderful too, that people of all ages are finding this, your resource and finding that your information is helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's also a thing about folks, this is not dependent on age, but there are folks who I hear over and over again saying, like, well, I was the black sheep of the family because I fill in the blank, got a tattoo, had a child before I got married, because I didn't go to church, because I wore a short skirt, like fill in the blank thing. And that orientation of like, I don't quite fit, I don't belong, it feels really affirming for those of us who have had that experience to be in community with others who are shamelessly saying, right, that was me. I was a sinvergüenza. My grandmother always told me that. And this is
Yes.
how I'm living into that identity in a way that is healing and isn't just for show or even recovery of one's own self. It's a living into that shamelessness for the freedom and liberation of humans all across the board. Because the more of us who live shamelessly, the harder we are to control, which means the less obedient we are, mindlessly obedient to what authorities say, and the more we're doing our own discernment. And that's how change happens, is people taking responsibility for their own faith, their own beliefs, and their own actions. And the more we can do that, the more powerful others feel like, oh, if they did that, maybe I could do that. What does that look like? What does that feel like? And we kind of get ourselves in a new rhythm of what life could be like if we're a little more free, and then a little more free, and then a little more free.
And the language you speak is just so resonates with women in particular, because like you said, you're speaking about all issues on manner of sexuality and gender identification. But at the end of the day, even those of us who are cis white, still have no shame, whether, like you said, and so we all understand this language that you're speaking about. I think it's universal.
Yeah, absolutely.
And everybody's welcome. It's a conversation that centers a particular demographic of people, particularly because we have so rarely been listened to, because at least in the US in particular, we've been taught that the more invisible we are, the safer we are.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a particular moment in which pulling out queer and trans Latinx folks, theologians who are thinking about God, who are thinking about activism, who are thinking about embodiment in this moment, and listening in, that is who is centered, because that is whose voice needs to be amplified at this moment. That doesn't mean that it is exclusive of anybody. Everybody's welcome. And I do truly believe exactly what you said, that everybody coming, whether you're cis, male, whatever, like, I think there's something to be learned there, even if it's just, I'm learning how people with different experiences in the world understand God, the divine, current issues, and then use that to inform and be a counter narrative to all of the noise that we're given about being criminals, about being stupid, about women supposed to be this or supposed to be that. Like, it just helps balance some of that noise that just gets bombarded into our spirits and our beings all the time.
Absolutely. Well, Reverend Alba Onofrio, a.k.a. Reverend Sex, thank you so much for joining us this week on Good Faith Weekly. You can check out Alba's work at soulforce.org, or make certain to subscribe to her podcast, Shameless. You can find it wherever you listen to your podcast. It has been a joy talking with you today, Alba. But before we let you go, we've got one last question to ask you, and Missy has the honor of asking it.
So, Reverend Sex, as you know, our tagline at Good Faith Media is "There's more to tell." So, in light of your work and our conversation today, what is your more to tell?
I think the good news of great joy for all people should be that the things that you've been taught that don't feel right in your body probably aren't. And there is so much more out there, and there are so many of us who are on that journey. And so the invitation is to join the journey in whatever way, to work on reclaiming who we are and who God made us to be, and know that that made in the image of the divine is not an abstract concept, but an embodied and fleshed, pleasure-seeking, desire-filled, joyful, abundant life. And it's possible.
I love it.
Love it.
So when's season 2?
January, I hope. January, I hope. We have a book coming out. I'm looking at the final design right in front of me as we speak, on spiritual violence and other religious phenomena that abuse the faith.
Wow.
And the first series of this next season will focus on the concepts connected with that, which is around white Christian supremacy, spiritual violence, spiritual terrorism, religious abuse, and spiritual trauma in general. But it's a way of getting at it through lived stories, lived realities. Yeah, real people's lives, that I hope folks will listen into that conversation.
Well, I hope you'll come back when the book is released
Absolutely.
and talk to us about it. That'd be great.
Anytime.
Absolutely. Well, Reverend Alba Onofrio, thank you so much for being with us. It is a delight. And as Missy said, you are welcome back to Good Faith Weekly anytime.
So much. It has been a pure delight.
And to our listeners, we want to thank you for joining in this week. And Missy and I will be back next week with another guest. And until then, keep living good faith. You've been listening to Good Faith Weekly, hosted by Mitch and Missy Randall. This weekly podcast from Good Faith Media discusses matters of faith and culture.
Subscribe wherever you get your podcast and give us a like and a glowing review. We produce the podcast out of Norman, Oklahoma. Our music comes from Pond 5.
And we're supported by listeners like you. Learn more about us at goodfaithmedia.org.